Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening in some cases. This is Veronica Rebollo, one of the people behind World Rainforest Day and Rainforest Ambitions, representing Rainforest Partnership. Today is a very special day, actually. We're celebrating World Rainforest Day, and it's also the third day of Rainforest Ambitions. And today, we're specifically focusing on long-lasting impact. The first day we were focusing on collaboration, how different groups, different nations, different individuals representing different backgrounds should cooperate for a good practices in conservation and restoration. The second day we were seeing how this cooperation materialized on the ground. And today we're gonna address how this action on the ground sustain over time and materialize in long-term benefits and is able to overcome challenges. In this session specifically, we're talking about resilience, the ability to recover from changes, to bounce back stronger, and how NGOs what the strategies they could use, how they could address these challenges gracefully and with resources. And who better to talk about resilience and to host this session that our Chief Strategist, Rainforest Partnership Chief Strategist, Beth Kaplan. Because she certainly has a big important role in the organization. So not only she lifts our spirits where things are going tough, she's an amazing problem solver. So who better than her to moderate this session? I will, before giving the mic to her, talk you through a few technicalities. Right now, you are all muted and off camera, but we encourage you to communicate with us using the chat. Drop general comments there. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming from, what organization you're representing. Use this space for networking to connect with each other or to share information with us. If you have specific questions for our panelists, use the Q&A box. We will have some time at the end of the session to address these questions. And now that said, I hope you enjoy this session. And Beth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that incredibly gracious introduction, Veronica. As you have been a gracious presence throughout many of these Rainforest Ambition sessions and a leader for us for World Rainforest Day. So it's my pleasure and honor to thank you and acknowledge all that you've done, all that you're doing, and the boost that it has been to rainforests. So thank you. With that, the premise behind all of this is that the only constant in life is change. I know it's coming, and I can't tell you whether it's a good or a bad change or characterize what it's going to be, but I can only tell you for sure, change is coming at us. And if you understand that, if you embrace that, then there's one undeniable conclusion. If change is the constant, then we have to develop the capacity to anticipate it, absorb it, adapt to it, and navigate all of it, not to survive, but to thrive. When you embrace that as a philosophy, it allows you to encounter, one, to forecast and anticipate, but also to encounter almost any change with a resilience that lets you get through, above and beyond. I'm really honored to be hosting this session and to introduce in a moment the two people who are going to share the stories of resilience at their organizations in this most recent challenging time. But let me just start with a little bit. No one is going to be surprised when I say that we've all experienced massive and unanticipated disruption in 2020. I mean, that's not news, we did. But what might surprise you is how these two organizations, Rainforest Partnership and Little Herds, found their trajectory to navigate still toward their goals and their vision. So we're going to explore those stories, not as a chance to tell their history, but for the benefit of the lessons that all of us can take away to incorporate in our practice and design of what we do and how we live, so we can all better navigate the changes that are coming at us. So I'll give you one other just bit of housekeeping. Today's session is less a formal panel and more a reunion of friends. The three of us came together through a very powerful experience last year, last May, June, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit. And it was in the middle of a time when no one knew when or how the worst of it would be over. But it was, and we're on an upward slope, and it is great to be back with them today. So now I'm going to take the moment to introduce to you our two speakers, Robert Nathan Allen. I'll be calling him RNA because that's what we call him, from the executive director of Little Herds, and my friend and partner and CEO of Rainforest Partnership, Nyanta Spellman. I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing them beyond that because I would like them to do that in the context of the first question I'm going to pose to them. I'd like you each to give a description of your organization, what you do, what your purpose is, but with two distinct points in time. What was the organization like in January, February 2020? And where is it today? In your vision, in your goals, in what you thought you were going to do in terms of activity, and what's the difference? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over first to RNA.
Thank you, Beth and Nyanta. This is, I'm so pleased and thrilled to be here sharing with y'all today. Like you said, it seems like just yesterday that we were all getting together and really navigating this, you know, a year ago and figuring out what was going on and what we were going to do. And it's amazing to see how y'all have been able to, like you said, thrive and really refocus, rehone, and you know, I think that there really is so much parallel between our journeys, and that we both started off on a path and we could see our destination, and you know, the road got washed out and we could have stayed on that road. We could have slogged through the mud. Maybe we would have got there. It would have been messy and difficult. But instead we were nimble and able to say, you know, what's another path we can take? Can we go around? Can we go above? Can we go through, under? What can we do to make sure that we're still going where we want to go? And for us, it was, you know, it was quite the shift. Our organization, Little Herds, we started back in 2013 as a charitable educational nonprofit with the focus of educating the public about the benefits of insect agriculture, and specifically edible insects, looking at them as nutritious and resource efficient alternative proteins, not just for people, because we know that a lot of folks who have an American or Western diet or food culture, that's not a food that we've grown up thinking of, you know, as normal. And so most folks, especially, you know, 8-9 years ago, were very hesitant or reticent to try insects as a food. But we can use insects as a food for our pets, as a food for our livestock. We can use them as a waste management tool to take unused or low value organic products and upcycle those into high value fats and proteins and minerals and vitamins. We can take their fats and turn them into biofuels. We can take their exoskeletons and turn them into biopolymers. So there's really a wide variety of ways that we can use insects as a natural resource that at least our food culture, our culture has forgotten about. And even though so many cultures around the world, you know, including cultures in the rainforest, have protected and respected and continued these traditions, it's, you know, we're really the odd ones out. We're the ones who are, because we have forgotten about this resource. And so, you know, back 13 when we started, we very quickly saw that kids' education was going to be a key component for us, because kids didn't have that psychological taboo that you or I or other adults might have, and especially younger kids. You know, any of us had young kids knows they'll stick just about anything in their mouth, and if it tastes good, they'll keep it in their mouth, and if it doesn't, they'll spit it out. And so, you know, we would go to a farmer's market, and little kids would be crunching on crispy crickets, and the parents would be behind them, you know, freaking out, going, "What are you feeding my kids?" And no, look, it's cool. It's it's good for, it's healthy, it's good for them, it's resource efficient, it's good for the planet. It's a more ethical way of growing livestock, and we can turn it into a powder and we can put it in breakfast cereal. So instead of the sugary stuff that they see on TV, thing that they love has all these vitamin minerals. And imagine if kale or Brussels sprouts or asparagus was that easy. And most of the adults were saying, no, okay, I'm probably not going to eat it myself, but I guess I'm okay if my kids eat it. And we were like, yes, that's a win. And from there, over the years, we've had the opportunity to be a resource to the public, to parents, to make sure that they have factual science-based information about insects and where to get insects to make sure they're safe, ways to try different recipes, things like that. But also a resource to educators who wanted to introduce this to their students, a resource for researchers and entrepreneurs who were figuring out how to breed insects, how to farm insects, how to grow them, a resource to chefs, to policymakers, to regulators, really trying to ensure that we can use this moment in time as an opportunity to do things right, because there's so many things in our food and agricultural system that have gone off the rails, and have a lot of negative externalities. And the rainforest is a perfect example of how our food system can scale unethically, and destructively, and how people and the environment can be the one to take the hit. And so, we really wanted to make sure that this was something that we could be a new movement that would take that into account and recognize and respect those cultural traditions from around the world who had kept this ingredient sacred, and be able to then apply the technology, the ingenuity, the resources of our Austin community and beyond to really figure out how to make this something that can be used both in our own communities, as well as a way for people to have food and economic security within their own homes and their own communities around the world. And so that's what we did up until January, February last year. We did sessions at libraries and after school programs and Girl Scouts and 4-H clubs and you name it, anywhere that kids were interested in trying new things. And we were right on the cusp of organizing and executing the largest food-focused event at South by Southwest, which for those who aren't familiar, South by Southwest is a cultural event in Austin. Calling it a conference or a festival is really underselling it. And we're really excited to be bringing this idea alongside plant-based proteins, seaweeds, all, cellular meats, all these other future food ideas. And then the pandemic hit, and the conference was canceled, and all of the time and the money and the effort and the people and the passion that was invested in that felt like it was slipping through our fingers. And very quickly we decided that we were going to take what we could and try to help those folks in our own community. We immediately started seeing folks in the service industry, and I have a service industry background, folks that were losing their jobs. So many folks really rely on South by Southwest as this big touch point within the year to make a lot of their income. And so, all of the samples and all of the foods and everything that we were planning on using to serve the attendees, we figured out, how can we get that to a food pantry? How can we get that to a nonprofit that's serving kids? How can we get that into the hands of people who are, all of a sudden, and for many of them for the first time in their lives, now food insecure? So many people had maybe always been a medical bill or a family emergency away from being food insecure, but had never had to rely on a food bank, had never had to rely on a community organization for those kinds of resources. And so, very quickly we were able to draw on our relationships with farmers, with chefs, with local funders, and try to figure out how we can bring these pieces together. How can we take these underutilized resources, underutilized labor, people who were looking for work, and take that food from the farm, get it to the restaurant that's looking for work for their employees, have them turn it into food, and then put that into the hands of the nonprofits that are serving children and seniors, people with disabilities, a wide variety of folks who were especially hard hit. And it worked. We were amazed at how quickly we were able to insert ourselves into this ecosystem of food recovery and food access. And we were really fortunate that we have had a great number of nonprofit organizations, from Keep Austin Fed to county-funded programs like Keep Austin Together, and nonprofits like Good Work Austin, that we've been able to work hand in hand with. And so this last year, our mission really shifted. We kind of joked before the pandemic, our mission was to help people eat bugs. And after the pandemic, our mission was just help people eat, period. It didn't feel right to be talking about eating crickets when people were waiting for hours at the food bank to get a box of produce. And so to be able to, make that drastic shift, at first it felt so different, but over time we realized that it was right in line with our original core mission. Our goal was to make sure that we were addressing hunger and addressing resource scarcity and food access and food justice. And so to be able to work hand in hand with people in our community, leaders in our community who were, working with and serving communities who needed those resources was incredible. And so that really led us back full circle. This last year, or this just a few months ago in March, we were able to take our original South by programming, turn it into a digital event, and have some of those conversations where we were able to bring, leaders from the nonprofit community and the senator, local farmers and nonprofit leaders, and have conversations about how the pandemic has really, exposed and exacerbated those inequalities and those inequities, and how, rather than trying to get back to normal, we really should be saying, how can we build this better? How can we rebuild this better? How can we come back and make sure that food access and food justice is core to our mission? And so now, we're really able to bridge those two worlds and look at how insects is one. It's not a silver bullet, it's one thread of a fiber with all these other threads that's needed for that string.
That's awesome. And I'm really excited by the way you told that story, because you've brought up some things that we're going to circle back to as the elements of resilience and the decision-making and the pivots that I think are some of those amazing takeaways, aside from it just being an amazing story of how you hit with a roadblock, just went, not going to worry about it. We'll helicopter over and we're going to find another way. So with that, let me pose the same question to Nianta. I know the answer, but I want you to share it. I want you to share it with our audience. What was Rainforest Partnership's position in January, February 2020, and where are we now? And give us a sense of what that difference is, to the extent that there are differences.
Thank you so much, Beth, and lovely to hear that from you, RNA. And as we celebrate, first of all, happy World Rainforest Day. It is pretty amazing and remarkable to be here 5 years on, to see the kind of engagement and activation that's happening around the world. A lot has happened since. The news of the Amazon fires going mainstream a couple of years did a lot for that. But being here today, post-pandemic, in a way, to be there where the world is, and to have to go back a year and a half ago is really difficult, because I almost don't want to go there. It's easier to go back to 2017 when we started World Rainforest Day. So maybe I'll do that so it doesn't feel so terrible. But really, we started World Rainforest Day in the shadow of the US pullout of the Paris Agreement. We were going to wait till 2018 because we didn't think we were quite ready. And watching the team, the Rainforest Partnership team, I made them watch it, what was, that Rose Garden ceremony. I could not bear to watch the screen, so I just listened. I had it sideways, and there were 10, 15 of us in the office. People were upset, angry, sad. And we said, okay, we're going to be with our emotions. And the next day, we launched World Rainforest Day, and with 29 partners in 2017, it was amazing. And here we are. And in between, a lot has happened. So perhaps one other distraction. I want to celebrate and thank Veronica Raboyo, who's on this call, because it's her birthday as well. How fitting that one of our two incredible World Rainforest Day coordinators has a birthday today, like the planet wanted to gift it. So with that, I will do the journey back that I'd rather not do, but will, to January and February of 2020. So we had an incredible year in 2019 because it was the year when the world started waking up. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a sad thing that the Amazon fires had to go mainstream. And, you know, for days, there was one morning, we were just getting all sorts of messages. And I was wondering, what's going on? And I was like, do we have a campaign I don't know about? Did we do something I don't know about? And by about 10, 11, 12, it was like, what's going on? We found out that the news had gone mainstream. Why? Because the forest had burnt every year for, you know, 2, 3, 4 decades. But the thing was, with the first time, all that black cloud went and shrouded Sao Paulo with about 30 million people in darkness in the middle of the afternoon. And everybody's like, what happened? And suddenly it was in the news. And so following that, I was traveling a lot. People really wanted to do something. It was about the Amazon. Every second person that I was meeting wanted, you know, Amazon had become a big deal for them. And so there we were planning in January and February. I'd been on the road every month. I was barely home, it felt like. Our work on the ground was going really well, all sorts of things happening. We had plans, and I remember with Beth sending me these messages saying, we need to watch what's going on. We need to watch. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, we need to think about this. Too much was going on. You know, South by Southwest was coming along, which is our Films for the Forest event, which is one of our big events. So we're focused on that on top of everything we do. And the next thing, on March 13th, like most people, we shut our office down and went remote. And I was there till about 5 with Marika, who did our HR stuff, and we were talking and sitting down and sort of try to get everything in order. Our fridge was full of food. Got somebody, you know, 2 people to take everything home because we didn't know how long we were going to be remote. And then pretty soon, this is where I think the planet was doing us a favor. Our landlord had invoked a 6-month what do you call it, exit clause in our lease in October. And so at the end of April, our lease was going to go away. Tried to get them to let us stay in the office, because where were we going to move things? How could we move? We weren't allowed to move. We were supposed to be in lockdown. And they wouldn't. And so by April 2nd, we were out of the office. And here's the funny thing. In February and March, alongside everything else that was happening, we'd been building our online systems. We had an RP, Rainforest Partnership Hub, and we had finally started getting everybody to embrace Slack, and we were using Trello. And suddenly it was like overnight, we go remote, and it was seamless for us to start working as a remote team. Here's something else that happened. Beth, who was in Houston, often got left out and forgotten because we were an office. We had an office, a wonderful office. People loved being in an office. A lot of people wanted to come meet me in my office. Why? Because they said it felt like therapy. I would often say, come to the rainforest in Austin, Texas. And, you know, we had a lot of forest pictures and it was just a lovely feel. They would say it's great energy here. And we went remote, and I went back to where I am now, which is where Rainforest Partnership began, in my house. And some amazing things started happening. And that was the collaborations across our teams increased. to an incredible level. So now everybody was on an equal footing. So geography did not matter. That meant that all sorts of other things happened. That meant that Veronica in Freiburg, Germany, could be the World Rainforest Day coordinator. You know, the first few years, it was somebody in the Austin office. We were no longer hamstrung by geography or by certain limitations on time zones and many other things. So that happened. I'd rather not think about March, April, May, because they were also incredibly difficult months. I, like many people, didn't sleep many nights. I really, can you tell I'm resisting? It's something I don't even like to think about, because the difficult part of it, the challenging part, I don't even want to touch it, and I'm not going to, because that's just part of the work we do. You know, with everything, our events being thrown off, funding sources going off, people, the funding that's supposed to come in disappearing, team members having sort of crisis of confidence and suddenly like epiphanies and life changes, because this pandemic threw people in for a loop. And, you know, you had to honor where people were. And so all sorts of shifts happened. But here was the amazing part. Our team on the ground in Peru grew, whereas every other organization that I can think of and we knew slowed down their work, lost their teams. Our team actually grew. The work we were doing, the impact we were creating actually grew several folds. And our team was so resilient, and they were like, oh, we don't have funding for this. We cannot travel. We don't have a travel budget. We cannot travel. We cannot do these things. Oh, what do we have to lose? Sleep? And so they lost sleep and did things they couldn't do before because we didn't have the budget or the ability, the manpower. And it's like, how do we make this work? And so we use things like Zoom to bring people together, to do webinars that couldn't have been done before. So it was all sorts of things. And so where we are today looks like a completely different team. And just before we got together here, we had an incredibly lovely bonding with several of us coming and saying happy birthday to Veronica. Not everybody even knew that was her birthday, but we could do it. Where we are right now didn't matter. The last, this 3 days of Rainforest Ambitions, people have been awake at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning to join conversations. And RNA, you, Beth, and I were part of that group back in May, I think it was. It would have not been possible before. We could not, I was about the only one who was traveling for Rainforest Partnership to as many things as I could go to, which is very limited. And suddenly we could do everything. The hard part was we were working 7 days a week with very little sleep. And that's probably been the toughest part about this year. And I think, I don't know, most of my team, we are waiting to get past World Rainforest Day. And I think we will finally go into this phase in July after a year and a quarter, where we will probably take a breath finally. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Beth.
Thank you. I'm going to take a minute or two and just add a couple of things about what's different or where we are in 2020 now or 2021 now. One of the fundamental things, and Jante touched on it, but I really want to drive this one home, is the lean into remote, the lean into virtual was something that we had been building the capacity to do, and Jante talked about that. When the decision was made to shut down the office, yeah, like everybody else, you know, you're hit. But it didn't take very long. And I'm talking about a matter of a day or two before it was like, what do we have that we can use? What can we turn on? What can we rely on? And oh, by the way, if we can't screen films for the forest at South by Southwest, can we find a way to do it, breakthrough idea, online on Earth Day? But now the clock is ticking because we don't have a platform for that. And we don't know how to stitch it, to stream it like that. And the team dug in and didn't get bogged down in, we've never done it before. They got it done. And on Earth Day, we did our virtual screening to a bigger audience than we would have had in person at South by. Similarly, we started saying, okay, look at World Rainforest Day, which had always been designed as having, yeah, it had a virtual component of social media. By the way, tweet like crazy, post like crazy, it's still World Rainforest Day. Pitch for that. But the events that we were asking partners to do were local. Work with your community, have an event at your botanical gardens or your zoo, get your supporters together wherever you are. Can't do that now. What could we offer partners that was going to be meaningful if the world couldn't do together that way? And we came up with the idea of doing a virtual online screening of partner films and try to start to build a virtual thing. Here was the takeaway. It's what we should have been doing all along. And so today, Rainforest Ambitions was only made possible because of the realization that virtual breaks down geography and time zone. We can be everywhere with everyone as long as they've got an internet connection. We are delighted to be with all of you around the world whenever you're watching this. That's one of the things that the resilience and the choices that we made allowed us to do. So it's one of those very specific examples, but if not for that challenge, we're not here like this today. I promise you that. I loved listening to both of you tell, the stories of the choices, the challenges. You could have held on to RNA, you could have held on to, this is how we're going to do it, and this is our focus. But I think there's something, and I remember you saying this, there was just something so beautiful in how you recast the mission so that it was, yes, we want to offer people an opportunity to move to a higher level of sustainability, but you put people back at the forefront of the equation, that this is about people. And I remember when you talked about that, when we all were together in May last year, and it was a powerful moment of not just a beautiful sense of service and of giving, but a very strategic, a very thoughtful adaptation to this moment to say, what on our path to accomplishing what do we want to accomplish, our mission is really about people. And we have to take care of people now so that we can continue to move them higher later. So it was just like the strategic part of my brain was like, yes. And then the emotional part of my heart was like, oh my goodness, yes. It was beautiful and powerful and resonant. And it's why I'm so delighted that it's been a successful move. So in touching on the experience that we all had, so first of all, a huge shout out and thank you to Chelsea Toller, who brought all of us and others together in this strategic learning cohort that she created, which I almost think of as like, it felt like a 24-hour experience for about 10 days. Because if we weren't together, we were working on the stuff so we could work together. And it was so powerful what she shared and what we shared with each other. So my question is, and there was a lot, but what are some of the things we learned in that experience? That's that durable takeaway of skills and knowledges or understanding about ourselves and our organizations that has to do with resilience. And so I'll start with you again, RNA.
Yeah, and I think another shout out for some of our other cohort members. We had Miranda with Any Baby Can, and Dr. Thomas Hockaday with the Central Texas Allied Health Institute. And it was really amazing in that those were people in the Austin nonprofit community that I had never had the chance to meet. I'd never had the opportunity to meet in person. And through that and learning about their organizations and them going through these same existential questions that we were going through, and being able to hear how they were dealing with these issues and how they were also adapting on the fly, we were able to end up working with them. And so those were some of the organizations. Any Baby Can, as an organization, they help parents with who are pregnant or have newborns or infants who have additional medical conditions. And so they're a resource for those parents and those infant caregivers when they are dealing with these hardships beyond how difficult it already is to raise a baby. And to be able to get to know them better and grow closer to them, and then to be able to help funnel those resources to them, and have it not be a one-way street, have it be a two-way thing. Because we as an organization, we didn't know the families who had infants who were all of a sudden food insecure, but Veranda did, and she had that trust, that core trust and relationships with those folks. So it really was a win-win-win scenario where we were able to say, look, we've got the resources and the connections to get meals, and you have the network of folks and the volunteers who know these people and know where they live and are willing to help get the food to them. And so it really was a perfect match. And Dr. Thomas Hockaday and Central Texas Allied Health Institute, we're now we're finally about a year after meeting and initially brainstorming. We're starting a pilot program where we're looking at how we can help provide additional resources to the clients that come to their clinics, because they've been offering testing services and vaccination services, and they have ongoing classes where people can go in, get rapid retraining and certifications to go into careers in med tech and med fields. And so to be able to work with them and help provide those additional resources to the folks that they are working with, whether it's the clients or the students, so that they are able to, like you said, right, so that they're able to have what they need to do what they're meant to be, do what they're meant to do, and be who they're meant to be. They're not having to, that's one thing that's not on their stressor list, right? Just having that additional thing taken off can really make a huge impact, especially when someone is trying to learn a new career, learn new skills, to be able to give back to their community. So we're very excited that those sorts of relationships and partnerships and collaborations that Chelsea and her accelerator, incubator, intensive really help forge those. And I apologize. Now I've lost the question completely.
No, that's okay. You're getting to some of those key things that came out of this. The idea of the getting outside your silo, getting outside your organizational network comfort zone to reach across for the unexpected connection and collaboration that gives you that cushion, but also that higher efficiency than what you do, where you're not working, I'm going to do my thing here and they're going to do their thing here. Turns out when you marry those two, and the example you gave is so powerful, it's not just the sum of the 1 + 1 = 2, because now somehow 1 + 1 = 7. When you've the alchemy and the chemistry of bringing those together. And I think that's one of the things that's one of those great lessons, is the power of unexpected collaboration and partnering. That it was fortuitous that came together that way, but it's something that we can be looking to do proactively, actively. You don't have to wait for the next challenge to say, okay, where's that unexpected relationship that can leverage, right? So I think that's a really beautiful one. I'm going to flip it to Nianta. What are some of your takeaways out of that experience?
Gosh, one that I will say, you talked about us doing a global live stream. What was interesting is when we launched World Rainforest Day the first time, people kept saying, where's the event? And we said, a lot of it is online. And people could not get their hands around it. And the second year was the same thing, third year. And if I think about what happened, I don't know how many of you remember, in our space anyway, people were just paralyzed. I mean, these are supporters, these are friends, maybe less family members, but and team members. People just stopped responding. You could not get a text, call, email back. And even for a simple question, it's like people had to go inwards. Like it was a shock to the system across the world in a way that we'd never, ever experienced. And, you know, I've lived in many different parts of the world. And having a mother who's connected to all sorts of families and friends on all 6 populated continents, I can tell you I get secondhand news because I don't have time to engage with most of the family and friends. But it was so funny how similar our experiences were, right? So we're dealing with that and nobody's paying attention, right? And then Earth Day happens and suddenly everybody woke up. So yes, Films for the Forest, we took it to an online global live stream, and we had audiences in all 6 continents, which was pretty amazing. In the Pacific Islands, you know, we'd never had that. The first World Rainforest Day, we had an audience in Sub-Saharan Africa. As somebody who's born and grew up in Sub-Saharan Africa, that was amazing, right? But this was truly global. And so by the time we got to World Rainforest Day, people were waking up to this idea that you can connect virtually, and suddenly a whole bunch of things were possible, you know, virtually. And so there is a way of convening, there's a way of collaborating and planning that people were resistant to before, but no longer are. And so I think we had to push the limits. Some of us, you know, we problem solve for a living. We used to problem solve for a living every day, I used to say. Then we got past that because, you know, we were able to go to that strategic place. And then for a little bit, we had to problem solve once again. And it wasn't just problem solving. If you're looking at somebody, your team members on a Zoom call, I don't know how many of you felt that way, that we were also counselors, right? Practicing without license in a sense, but we had to watch out for each other. I mean, every one of us hit bottom at some point or the other, and recognizing and just stopping to ask how somebody's doing. And you didn't know, because all of us are so good at putting up a front. And so learning and integrating all that into the systems for how we work and what's possible and not be limited. And so for me, you know, every day there's something new. And as we are finally moving to this other place of being more collaborative, looking at what's possible, how it's possible, what's really interesting to me is knowing that we can actually create a completely different pathway across all sorts of communities, across all sorts of organizations, across all sorts of countries, sectors. And, you know, just looking at World Rainforest Day, just the sessions we've had, the conversations we're having. So RNA, the conversations we had last May or June, moving from that to today and yesterday and day before, the conversations are completely different. Mm-hmm. It's like we have learned how to connect at a very human level, how to collaborate, how to open up. And I was reading, so, you know, I will tell you this, I was looking at it today, it's supposed to be the biggest crime day. And I was like, I know that's true, that's people's reality, that people are buying things online. My reality is that people are far more collaborative. And for some of us who know that our goal is 2030 to get to a place where our planet can be stable, not just for us, but for the rest of humanity and everything else that coexists with us on our planet. What is it that some of us are going to do? And how are we going to work? And so what's our fundamental why? What's our purpose? That's something we've ended up with in the last month, 6 weeks. It's like, what do we have to add? What do we have to share? What do we bring to the table? How do we uplift others? How do we invite others? And for us, how do we truly, truly take it to the next level? The fact that partnership is in our name, the fact that that's in our DNA, we partner and work together. What can I learn from you, RNA? Oh, and by the way, I'm a vegetarian. I will tell you, I've eaten ants and termites and grubs, because
we had a grub, we have video.
And you know, those lemony ants. I'm reckoning that, you know, vegetarians can eat those things. I couldn't do it every day. It's not easy for me. But you know, we've eaten, and
She's not going to have special occasion bugs.
And I do watch insects. You know, if you've watched, I mean, I will have difficulty, because have you seen ants that die eating through a metal cap so they can get to the sugar and create a pathway for the rest of them? Have you ever seen that? Have you seen what tree roaches do about sending signals and how they hide? I've been watching the social networks, and I'm thinking, these things are super smart. Like, you know, I'm not an entomologist, but I watch these things, right? I watch these insects. The natural world is amazing. And how do we connect people to it and what's around us, and how do we create sustainability? And so how are we mindful and purposeful in the work we're doing, in everything we're doing? And so I think that's the big shift. What is the fundamental why? What's the purpose? Not just for us as an organization, we're very clear on that, and we have convergence around that, but then every initiative and project and plan that sits on that.
Really, I think I've got to reemphasize that idea of really effective alignment, so that when you know your big whys, you know your big purpose, you have to have, and that's something we've been doing in this last year. We're never afraid to do it, but we've done it. We've been doing it recently. We're still working on some of it. That test against our vision, mission, and purpose for every line of service that we have, to make sure that it's in alignment with where we need to go. I'm going to reflect back on, I'm going to put, I'll park you for a minute. I'm going to bring up just a couple of things from that May intensive, and share just a couple that I thought were really important coming out of that. And one was the sense of finding your own identity, finding your own voice, and the confidence to stand behind who you are and your place, whether as yourself and as the representative of the organization. And doing it, whether that's in person. I mean, when we put Nyanta in front of live people, there's no one better. The world lights up around her in response. But RNA, you probably remember with me the day Chelsea made us all pitch without warning. And it was a struggle, because now we're doing it through this screen. And it's different. And for me, I had never been really a public-facing voice for RP. And so all of those things, it was not just a journey of tools and knowledge, but you're more resilient when you have the confidence of who you are and why you do what you do, and owning it, and never letting anybody shift you off that sense of purpose and identity. And I think that was one of the things that came out of it. And I think the other, and I don't want to lose it, and you both have alluded to it in different ways, but I'm going to bring it back explicitly, is the valuation of alternative forms of wealth, alternative forms of capital. And that is particularly for those of us who are from nonprofit organizations or NGOs, we're often judged on the size of our cash balance sheet, without recognition of the wealth that gives us the cushions to weather challenging times, that comes from our in-kind, from our volunteers and supporters, from the goodwill, from the knowledge that we have, from the network of people who support and sustain in ways both financial and other. And I'd like you guys to talk about that maybe for just 1 or 2 minutes, because I definitely have another point or two I want to get to before we're finished. And just a warning for everybody, we're going to run a little over, because there's so much goodness coming from you too. So let's talk about alternate capital for about 2-3 minutes, and then we're going to move on. Nyanta first. I'll change it up.
So this is a really important thing for us. We actually have gone out of our way. So 2 things coming out. By last summer, it became apparent, and part of it came out from, you know, the sort of Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement sort of coming to the forefront, and suddenly people talking about the kinds of things I was getting, as it was like suddenly it's like, oh, people are seeing me in new light, and they were talking about it. And, you know, as an organization, we look like everything. We're the spectrum of, in geographies, ethnicities, and languages, countries of origin, personalities, experiences, all that, right? Suddenly to be sort of seen in this sort of 2 or 3 dimension thing, I was like, really? This is what you're breaking me down to? Because suddenly you've woken up. That's not what we do. We don't see ourselves that way. And so it allowed me to reflect and stand back. And then we did as an organization, and to have the courage to stand up when we were seeing things. And so this idea was, you know, politeness. Being polite is not an option. There's not enough time. We're going to have the courage of our convictions. We know who we are. We have conviction in knowing who we are and what we're doing. And so the other side of it was, then it was the next bit, the next extension, recognition of what is wealth, what is capital, because in the nonprofit world, in other places, there's this skewing that happens, that so money is almighty. Well, yes and no. I mean, we can tell you, I talk, for example, the 30 days when the US was bombing $1 billion worth of bombing that happened on Afghanistan for 30 days, all you had was destruction. Money does not necessarily just build. Money channeled the right way, in the right, you know, amplifying the right kind of capital of all of the kinds, does amazing things. So what does it mean? How do you start looking at what wealth is, what capital is? How do you look at indigenous knowledge, trust relationships, you know, the professional experience, the knowledge base, and, you know, all the volunteers who are giving time, effort, money. Why do we have World Rainforest Day? It's because a whole bunch of people have come together to lend their very unique abilities and their time and their efforts. And so as long as we do not recognize that, we're skewing it in a way that makes no sense. And so when we acknowledge it and we recognize it, we know what makes us resilient, how we're resilient, what are the systems we have. Because that's what, you know, money was just one small part. That dried up for a bit. But we had all these other things, and that made us resilient because we could count on that. We could pull out reserves. Now, that doesn't mean that money, we don't need money. We absolutely do. But it's not the whole. It is this one part of the pie. And putting that in place, and that's when we can invite people to come join us and say, look at what you'd be powering, because here's your pie that enables, you know, this vehicle that's all ready to power and propel it into, you know, this incredible outsized impact. And so I think for us to recognize that is really important. And I think that's sort of in a nutshell what we've learned and where we've ended up.
Yep. RNA.
Yeah, that's one of the things you said was great, and it's you know, and this, we really saw this last year and even now today, that knowing your purpose and that being cemented and knowing this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is what we do well. That is key to, you know, what you said earlier about the idea that 1 + 1 can equal 2, but if you get the right 1 + 1, you're going to get 7. And you know, what we did with our partners really exemplified that. If we were going to try to feed people, it would have taken us so much more resources to make sure that the food was getting to the right people. If Veranda was trying to feed their families, and we, you know, this was happening before we were able to collaborate with them, you know, their team was expending so many resources buying food and preparing food, that wasn't their forte, right? Their forte was working with the families and helping them with the healthcare aspects. And so being able to take our one and their one and put together, we really were able to create more value. And so much of my understanding and Little Herd's understanding of how to leverage that came from the workshop with Chelsea, and really understanding the value of relationship capital. I think you said it great, that trust capital, right? When you know someone and you trust someone, and I can give you, $1 of my time, which saves you $2, and you can give me $1 of your time, which saves me $2. Now we're multiplying. Now we're literally creating value. It's not exchanging or reciprocating. It's literally creating the value. And so I think that's for us, it was really seeing, how these abstract things that we never really thought of as an asset, right? In the same way that we think of money. And you're right, Nyanda, you have to have money sometimes. But if all you have is money, then it's not as efficient. And when you can take those different things and leverage them together and put them together.
Yeah. Okay. And that idea of, increasing capital through these unique combinations of other assets. I think there's one other element that goes with that. And I think I alluded to it earlier, RNA, talking about that mission adjustment. But I think there's also, you have to come to this with a sense of generosity, with the idea that I'm ready to give something, even if there isn't something coming back, that I'm starting by putting others first, that I'm thinking about what my partner needs, not as transaction, but as relationship. And so as a result, there is, again, that building of reserves that people come to trust, and then you can also draw on that. So thank you. I think there was a lot of good in this. The last question I'm going to ask before we go to the other questions coming in. I think the buzzword of 2020, not necessarily the main words that got used, but the buzzword was pivot. We're going to pivot. Well, this happened, so we'll pivot to this. And then we pivoted to that, and I'm going to do a pivot and maybe a pirouette and then a pivot. But we all did them. I mean, it's a buzzword, but for us, it had an authentic ring. So I would just ask, thinking about what was maybe, and RNA, I'll ask for other than the pivot on mission, and Nyanda, other than the pivot to remote and virtual, what was one other major pivot or adjustment that you made that allowed you to navigate more robustly? RNA.
I think for us, it really was that recognition of the assets that we had that we've never considered, valuable, and really being able to reframe our thinking of those and say, these are things that we have. How much value can this bring to these other people? And like you said, right, thinking of it in an abundance mindset. There's not a scarcity mindset where there's only a limited number of things and it's all transactional and it's zero sum, but an abundance mindset that if we are giving these are things that we have that we can share and other people can get value from them. It's like planting seeds, right? And it's proliferating that value. So I think for us, it was really just recognizing how by listening and understanding the other folks in our community, the other folks in our ecosystem, and saying, okay, what can we bring to the table? In a kind of a potluck style, right? What can we bring to the table that others can really use and benefit from?
Great. Nyanda.
So there are a couple of things. I was thinking about it that we believed at this point wrongly. Actually, it's not wrongly, because we all mentally shifted and pivoted in terms of how work on the ground would happen as well. So I'll give you two examples. Our team in Peru did 11 webinars and then Facebook Live them. And I think they had an average of 2,000 people joining those. And they had never been done by anybody in Peru before. They brought community presidents onto those. They brought people from ministries of environment, regional governments, local governments, scientists, our team members. And it allowed for a dialogue that nobody had thought possible, that was never inclusive in the same way, because you only could do it if you could, you know, pay for the travel for somebody to come from the middle of the jungle to a Lima or a regional hub, and you never had the budget for it, or you had to coordinate it, and there were language barriers, and there's all sorts of other things. Well, Zoom changed that, because you can call in. You may not be on video, but you're calling in. You are participating. You are being represented. Your voice is represented there. And so when you bring people together, that happened. And there was an online course that our team did, an intense course that they coordinated with the regional government and did that. And then there was another project where we didn't have funding, and they said, how can we start doing these workshops online? And so communities started figuring that out, right? There are I heard this on one of the panels yesterday, a lot of the communities were sent, the only way you could communicate with these isolated communities was if they had internet. So governments were doing it because the schools, that's the only way, they were all virtual. So governments were doing it, we were doing it, other NGOs were doing it. And now you were connecting in ways that you hadn't connected before, that the kids were connecting to the world. And so things became accessible in a completely different way. And then the second side of it is, you know, this was a real thing that happened to us. We did not think that a project coordinator for us could be in another country or another place. They had to be at our headquarters. And our current headquarter-based project coordinator has not, she's been remote. We only met her, Beth and I only met her, Reina, just like 3 days ago, or I mean, a month ago.
Face to face, yes.
Face to face. But you know what? I could have, if you told me that, I would do a double take. It was like, no, we've met. We've been working with each other. We're so close. And some things happened in how that shifted. And it's mentally, but it's also in how we process it and how the world accepts it, how your boards, your donors, your communities, and of course, some things have to be done in person. So our teams are now in person where it's possible, where the communities are vaccinated, lots of tests and all that, but it is very different from where we were and what is possible today that wasn't before.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of and I'll amplify that. You know, one of the things that happened was and this is the way I describe it. When COVID happened, the world shut down, but every door opened to us because we were willing to go through it virtually. We got invited to events that we would not have been present at. We had events at Climate Week New York City. We had, I think, one or more every day for 5 days. But we couldn't have done that if it had only been in person. We've done World Rainforest Day partner lounges. We've done all sorts of events. I've been going to, I went to Zoomtopia. I'm going again this fall, so already know what my save the dates are. There are so many things that opened up, invitations, and frankly, in a world where Nyanta would go to many of these things, she will now be able to bring someone. So my coming to some of those events was only possible because it didn't involve spending travel money. It's true for so many more of our team members. Looking for those opportunities now is something we're more mindful of because we can do more enrichment for our teams and share more with the world. So that was one thing. RNA, I want to piggyback on a couple of on something you said and offer to people watching. There are some really great analytical resources you can use to build resilience. One of them is something RNA talked about, and that's doing an asset inventory. It's something that I've just recently done with another organization that I'm a member of, which is to say, what do you have? And it's beyond your bank balance. It's beyond your P&L. What do you have? Everything from what physical spaces do you have? What intellectual property do you have? What knowledge do you have? What's the value of your networks? What do you have in kind? What is it that you have? And helping people blow, frankly, the box away to get beyond what they classically think of as capital assets, to what is really valuable that you can leverage in good times for sure, and in bad times, absolutely. So understanding the good times, what you have, because it will let you anticipate how to better navigate that. So an asset inventory is a really great thing to do. Another is the classic SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And to be doing that, if not quarterly, semi-annually. Understand what the world is looking like, so that if there's something that looks like a trend that's coming your way, you'll know it's coming, both good and bad. What wave can we ride to greater performance? Or what path can we take around that still gets us to the goal because we see something coming at us? What are we good at? What should we lean into? What aren't we that we need to shore up or stop doing? SWOT analysis is a great thing for that. So those are a couple of tools I'd offer. I'm going to stop my questions here, and I'm going to go into, if it's okay with you too, a couple of questions that have been sent to us. And one of them, the first one, is for RNA. What are your favorite insects as food?
So it's funny to admit, but I actually haven't had the opportunity to travel to a lot of places in the world where insects are traditional. One of the things that the place where I went on my to eat list is the big bottom ants, the honeypot ants that are found there. They're just supposed to be delicious and like roasted and like popcorn. But one of the things that is much easier to find is chapulines, which are Oaxacan grasshoppers. And we're fortunate, an interior Mexican Oaxacan cuisine restaurant that has those on their menu as a secret item. So if you're ever have the opportunity to go to Oaxaca, or have the opportunity to go into a traditional Oaxacan restaurant, ask them if they have chapulines grasshoppers. They might have them in the back because the chefs might.
Good to know. Okay, secret menu items for everyone. Nianta, since you've had some experience with that, I think I'll pose the same question to you.
I don't have a favorite thing, but I watch my son eat those little, in Querétaro, those little grasshoppers, and my husband complained endlessly because they can get stuck that little. I was not tempted to try, there are some places I wouldn't go. I will tell you the lemony ants are quite, it's really interesting. It's like, okay, how? I don't even know what kind of species it is, but at least I know I wouldn't starve if I had to be in the forest. If a little plane went down in the middle of the forest, I think I've watched enough. And most things in the forest do not want to kill.
I'll chime in because the lemony ants, different ant species have different flavors depending on what they eat, depending on like if they have formic acid for their stings and things. But for folks that are a little hesitant, eating a grasshopper, eating an ant, that might be a little weird. You can find products now where they have cricket powders or mealworm powders. And so you can have a pancake mix that's fortified with insect protein, or a protein bar, a shake mix, chips, tortilla chips that are made with cricket powder instead of whey or soy protein powders. So those are easier ways to ease into it.
And I have to say, it's all sustainable, right?
I love
and don't look at it.
I love the idea that that insects and grapes have something in common, that they have terroir, that based on where they're grown, the same thing, the same varietal in different places tastes different. So maybe at some point, my family makes wine. Maybe we can have an insect and wine tasting. We'll figure out how to make that happen. I've got another question, and I'll start with Nianta. What are your plans from going back from completely virtual? Are you going back to hybrid? Are you going back to fully face-to-face? What's What's the RP plan? P.S. asking for a friend. It really came in as a question, but also asking for a friend.
I don't think we cannot go back to fully in the office. I mean, we never were. Part of our team was always virtual, and there is no way to go back. There is, in fact, I've said to the team, there are some days I will stay virtual because there's a way of working and thinking and connecting that's very different. I will also say the first day we got together about a month ago, and for somebody who loves whiteboards, I miss them. And you know, computer whiteboards don't work the same way. I want to be surrounded by whiteboards. When I want to write, I think it out, I write it down. We've done it in my backyard. We did it in this lovely office. The first day, Nabil, our director of operations, was really excited. I have to tell you, I was not happy. It felt odd. I almost had a headache. When we did it again, it was just so lovely because there's something that happens when you come together. And so being hybrid is really important because there's some magic happens when you are in the same room, as we were with, you know, two of our team members from Peru, and you were here, Beth, and Reina came in. So we had, you know, I don't know, 10, 12 people when you have a board member, an advisor, and there's this mixing that happens, and conversations and work and brainstorming and planning that happens. It's very different than when you do it online. So we will be hybrid. Some of that will still depend on when we're able to go back in and where. But I think some things like cooking lunches and, you know, having things around food will always be important to RP. So we will have that. And I don't know if you saw, I know we're going to run out of time, but I saw there was a question from somebody about how do you rest, recover, and stay positive while defying challenges? And I will tell you that that's part of it, right? Because this being remote has been tough as ever because you do not get a chance to plug off or like sign off. It's one after another, and how do you build it in? And I think that hybrid will allow for some of that rest and recovery and staying positive. Like you have time to walk or be in a car or listen to music. I mean, one of the days we were together, so nobody opened the back door, and I didn't check to go in the front, and I was like, I was just, you know, some classical music was playing. And it transported me in the car, and I just stayed there and just basking in that music in my car, surrounded by that, because that's what I needed to ground and rest and recover. And it was probably all of 10 minutes, but it was so restorative. And being in nature, one of the things I had to do by August or September last year, the only way I could deal was my family started long hikes, weekly long hikes. And I needed those long hikes. And that's how I did that. And then just learning when you need to switch off and finding a day. And for a while, it was just like a day once every 2 months or something crazy. And it's like forcing ourselves to do that. So building those in.
Okay. RNA, the virtual to where question, and how do you recharge?
Definitely hybrid, yeah. And it's so funny because when we were planning our event, our South by event before the pandemic, it was a very in-person event. And our goal was to try to incorporate virtual aspects of it so that the people who were there in person could interact with the nonprofits and the startups virtually. And then that got thrown out the window, and our entire event in this last March was virtual. But now we're already planning for 2022 and having that be a hybrid where we can have those in-person aspects, the food, those things that that don't translate virtually as well. But the thing that we've really learned, and I think the thing that we will keep core to our mission, is that if we are operating from the mindset that food is a right, then information about food is a right. And so we need to make sure that the lessons and the information and innovations that we're talking about are accessible to anyone and everyone. And so having that accessibility, the ability for someone in another country on the other side of the planet to engage in real time with that conversation was just so powerful. We're never going to go back to just in person. And so we're already thinking about how can we continue as we go forward to incorporate this idea of there's going to be something in person, but we always want to make sure that we have something that's going out to the world so that anyone can be part of that conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll piggyback on to both what you both said and to that question. What restores and renews me is, among other things, the energy, the enthusiasm, the power of this team that is distributed around the world. Hybrid is how we're going to have to be. It's what we want to embrace because our team is global now, and they have brought us such a diversity of perspective and ability, talent, energy, good humor, love, generosity. I see all of you, embrace all of you. You lift me in those moments when it gets a little tough. And I hope I'm able to do the same for all of you. And so keeping virtual is how I'll continue to get some of what I need to restore and renew. I want to thank both of you so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure just talking to two people who I have such great affection for. And look forward to continuing our dialogues on other subjects as well. If you want to ask other questions of the speakers, connect with them on their social media or on mine, ask questions there, or reach out to us at Rainforest Partnership and we will channel questions, and we are delighted to do that. One more thing before we hop, we've got still more Rainforest Ambition sessions today, so check the schedule. In a couple of minutes, we're going to be streaming a brand new series from Rainforest Partnership. We were talking about food, and it's called Flavors of the Forest, where we're going to explore connections to rainforest through cuisine and information about food. You're going to see more of me there today, but we are going to be showcasing recipes, chefs, foods, ideas from around the world in this series. And so this is the first installment. I invite you to join us by watching on the World Rainforest Day website and some of our other outlets. Also, I'll be hosting a session in conversation with X Prize Rainforest called Spotting Impact in the Wild, another one of our series. And there's other sessions. And almost all that we've done up to this point is going to be available for replay on our video hub. So check it out there. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your World Rainforest Day.